Turn the lights on for the Tyler Bright and Early podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Bright, PBJ Productions' official flagship podcast for all things college football center. And speaking of colleges, my college, the Louisville Cardinals, you may be seeing me wearing this jersey right here. Omaha bound. They are going to the College World Series, taking on the Oregon State Beavers in the first game on Friday, June 13th, I believe. Yeah, June 13th at 7 p.m. And love this team. Just love this team. You know, fighting some odds throughout the season. Didn't have a single road series win the entire season in 2025, but winning when it matters most on the road, especially in postseason. And then they came back to Jim Patterson Stadium to host Super Regionals, won game one, lost game two, in a best-of-3 series, won in the rubber match against the Miami Hurricanes. Got me a little worried there at times, but they got the job done. Now they're in Omaha and looking to win it all. But yeah, I'm excited. I'm going to be tuned in, and we'll see where they go from there. But a lot to talk about here in the world of college football. But first, before we go into that, make sure to follow us on all of our social media platforms. We're on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, as well as you can watch these episodes on YouTube and Spotify, as you're already doing right now, assuming that you're watching this or listening to this if you're listening to the audio version. But yeah, let's jump right into it. So the NCAA passed a bill that is going to allow schools to directly compensate their players. So the president of the NCAA, Charlie Baker, let's read this quote from him. He says, "This new framework that enables schools to provide direct financial benefits to student athletes and establishes clear and specific rules to regulate third-party NIL agreements marks a huge step forward for college sports." And my main takeaway from this is amateurism, no more. Does not exist. It is basically a professional league, college athletics is, at least in college football for sure, and I'm sure all the other revenue-generating sports as well. But this is basically means that these schools can directly pay these players to play for them. Now, how this is all going to be outlined, I'm sure there's still a lot of details that they're going to have to cover over the next few years. You know, are they going to eventually have player unions and unionize as college athletes, and how that's all going to work? It's going to take years to figure out. But yeah, you can officially call it a minor league product. And you could argue that it's always been kind of a minor league product, you know, going from directly from college football to the NFL, because that's similar to what baseball does. They have the minor league system, although they have college baseball as well. It's basically been a minor league as far as we've always known it, but now they're being compensated directly from the schools. And I believe I think it's going to be, each school is going to get maybe a $20 million salary cap. Sorry, I don't have the official language or the official. Oh yeah, here we go. Schools can share as much as $20.5 million of their revenues with players during the upcoming academic year. The settlement also includes a $2.8 billion in back payments for athletes who competed between 2016 and 2024. By the way, I'm getting this information from Brandon Marcello from CBS Sports, so credit to him on that. Yeah, so basically, that's their salary cap, is that $20 million as they outlined in the article. Now, what is this going to mean? Is this going to mean that if they go beyond that, is it kind of going to be something like a luxury tax, like what they have in like baseball? You know, you can go over that salary cap, but it's at a certain, there's a consequence to that at a certain cost. And are those schools going to be willing to pay that cost moving forward? And I'm sure you're going to see a lot of the powerhouse programs, the Alabamas, the LSUs, the Florida States, the Michigans, the Ohio States, so on and so forth. You know who the Blue Bloods are. I wouldn't be surprised if they go over this salary cap and just pour for these players. But, you know, I do think there needs to be some kind of regulation for it. I'm sure there is outlined, and they're figuring it out throughout the judicial system and trying to figure out the best system for everyone involved, for the players, the schools, and the coaches, kind of going around to figure out what's best for all parties involved. But yeah, that's the NCAA bill. So now we're going to be jumping in. It's around that time here in the summertime. Not much is going on. You know, the players are coming back. They're going into their summer camps, summer practices, but we're getting just a little bit closer into the college football season. So now is a perfect time to jump into predictions of how these teams are going to do in 2025. We're going to start off in alphabetical order in conference play, and we'll do half the teams here today in the ACC, but we'll do all the Power Four conferences. I'm also going to do the group of 5 conferences as well. We're going to make sure we cover all the teams in all of the FBS and give you their over-unders, what they're kind of slated throughout the season, my thoughts on how I think they're going to do in 2025. So starting off, first, the Clemson Tigers, according to FanDuel Sports, they are slated at 9.5 wins over-under. That is what it's set at. And I'm probably going to take the over. Clemson's schedule consists of, as I pull it up right here. So they start off on August 30th against the LSU Tigers at home. Then they face Troy. They go on the road to Georgia Tech, take on Syracuse at North Carolina, at Boston College, SMU, Duke, Florida State, at Louisville, Furman, and South Carolina. And I look at that schedule and I think they're gonna take the over. I could see Louisville, and this is a non-biased take from my perspective. I could see Louisville upsetting them. I could see them losing to maybe even Florida State. Or they could lose to LSU too. So I feel like if they win at least one of those, they're in a really good spot. So I do know that they have Tom Allen coming over from Penn State. That was a really good get, I think, for them and that defensive unit. Having Tom Allen, who's had the experience to be a head coach in a Power 4 conference like he was back with the Indiana Hoosiers. And this is a Clemson team that looked really dominant last season and even made the college football playoffs. So I think I'm going to take the over, and then I'll go into a conference standings rankings in the next episode once I finish out the ACC. But from now, we'll just move along. So next up is the Louisville Cardinals at 8.5 wins, and that's a pretty good total, I think, to set them on. But I think I'm also going to take the over there. We can take a look at Louisville's schedule as I go and pull it up. So the Cardinals, they take on Eastern Kentucky in the home opener, and then James Madison on September 5th, Bowling Green at Pittsburgh, Virginia, at Miami, Boston College, at Virginia Tech, California, Clemson at SMU, and the rivalry game against the Kentucky Wildcats. And I look at that schedule, I think they're going to win. I think they're going to win more. I think they're going to win at least 9 games. I do. I think they could. I think 9-3 is the perfect record, I think, for them. But, like I mentioned in previous episodes, a couple snaps go their way. They could have made the college football playoff last season. And, the games that stick out to me, obviously, the Clemson game on Friday night at home. That one's going to be a key game at Miami down in South Florida. And then, do they not play? Yes. Oh, yeah. On the road against SMU. Those are going to be the 3 games that you're like, okay, if Louisville's going to get over this total, those are the games that you're looking at. And then, like I said, Jeff Brom, he usually loses a game that he shouldn't. I wouldn't even be surprised if that is the case. Also, another key news is Vince Morrow coming over from Kentucky to Louisville. That's a really key get. He's going to be the general manager of this football program, and he's been there since Mark Stoops took over the Wildcats back in, I believe, 2013. Yes, 2013, because he left during right before Florida State won the national championship when he was their DC. But that's a really big get. He has really strong Youngstown ties, so I'm almost curious to see if they can get any Youngstown guys coming over from Louisville, which they were losing to Kentucky. But nonetheless, moving along in the ACC. Next up, the Miami Hurricanes at 8.5 wins. It's tough for Miami because they lost Cam Ward, and it really feel like it was Miami's year last season. They had Cam Ward, the best quarterback in the country, and they went on a tear, but then got upset against the Syracuse Orange. So it's just like I really felt like it was going to be their year last year, especially when they basically had a offensive shootout against Louisville, but it just wasn't their calling. And they do have Carson Beck, and that's going to be the big question as well. Is Carson Beck, are we going to see the return of what we saw back in 2023, or is he going to be what he was in 24, where he was just, it was really underwhelming and he just didn't really have that successful season? I don't know. I think it could go either way. I think he can do either really well and kind of flourish in that role, especially with the drama with his ex-girlfriend, one of the Cavender twins. And he's either going to flourish and kind of use that revenge and that motivation to kind of use that as bulletin board material, be like, you know what? I didn't have the season I want, but screw everybody. I'm going to go out and ball out with the Canes. But here's the Miami schedule for 25. They start off on August 31st against the Notre Dame Fighting Irish on ABC. Then they face Bethune-Cookman. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. South Florida, the Florida Gators at Florida State, Louisville, Stanford at SMU, Syracuse, NC State, at Virginia Tech, and at Pittsburgh. I probably should do a better job at keeping or being aware of what I'm saying is over and under, because obviously they all kind of equal out in a way. But I'm gonna probably have to say over. I think they could definitely. I mean, I think they're gonna lose to Notre Dame. Florida State, I think they're gonna have a bounce back season. Well, more on that later. But Louisville, I can see them. I can see that going either way. I would probably give them the edge because they're at home. At SMU, that's going to be a tough matchup as well. But other than that, it's not a tough schedule. So if you look at that, the teams I mentioned, Notre Dame, that's one. Louisville, that's two. And then you can even Florida State, that's three. And then I guess you can throw in Florida too, just because they have probably the hardest schedule in all of college football once again. I'm going to go over. I think this Hurricane team, I don't think they're going to be, some people are picking them to win the ACC. I disagree with that. I don't think Miami's winning the ACC, but I still think they're going to be over 8.5. I think that's a pretty low total. I would have probably done it at like 9 or 9.5, but I'm not really a sports book junkie. I only really focus on horse racing, but nonetheless, that's what they got. And that's what we're looking at here. So next up, the SMU Mustangs. They are also at 8.5 wins. Really, really impressive showing from the Mustangs last season in 2024. They went to the ACC championship. I don't think anyone was anticipating that heading into the year. And Rhett Lashley, he's done a great job. He coached there as a coordinator and has really made that a very successful team, as well as making the change to Jennings halfway through the season. And he just kind of ran away with that job at the quarterback position. And then, let's take a look at the schedule. So they start off against East Texas A&M, Baylor, at Missouri State, at TCU, Syracuse, Stanford, at Clemson, at Wake Forest, Miami, at Boston College, Louisville, and at Cal. This is another one that I'm probably going to have to say over, but I can't pick too many overs though. So someone has to be under. Let's take a look. So they start off, there's just no at Clemson. I just do not see this team losing 4 games. I just don't see it. Worst case scenario, I can see them losing to Louisville, Miami, and at Clemson. But I just think this is 9-3 written all over it. I think that's 9-3. So that's an over because it's at 8.5. Yeah. I don't really know much about the SMU Mustangs other than I saw them upset Louisville at home, and that was really frustrating as a Cardinal fan. But nonetheless, they got the job done, and that was the reason why they were a successful team. I don't think they're going to go to the college football playoff like they did last season, but they're going to be a successful team, and they're probably going to have a really good bowl game when it comes to the winter of 25. Florida State is up next, so their win total is set at 7.5. They had a disastrous 2024 season, only 2 wins. I don't think anybody was expecting that. I remember watching the opener in Ireland and just kind of seeing them, Georgia Tech just kind of be that sneaky team and get the win. And Florida State they did not look good. They just didn't look good. I think they're going to be a middle ground from the 23 and 24 season. They're not going to be an undefeated team or whatever they were back in 23. I don't even know I don't think they lost. No, they didn't lose in the regular season. They got smoked in the bowl game against Georgia. Florida State. So let's take a look at their schedule. Mike Norvell has a new offensive coordinator in Gus Malzahn. I think that's a good pairing, I think. Just kind of having that innovative guy who's been a high school coach. He's run this kind of read option offense, the inverted veer to be specific, and then Tony White is his as the defensive coordinator for the Noles. They start off against Alabama on August 30th. I'm not sure if that's week 1 or week 0. I think that's week 1. Then they face East Texas A&M. East Texas A&M facing some ACC teams. We've already mentioned them before. It's kind of interesting. An FCS school facing some ACC schools. Then they face Kent State. And then at Virginia, Miami, Pittsburgh, at Stanford, Wake Forest, at Clemson, Virginia Tech, at NC State, and at Florida. I think they're going to be a middle ground. I think they're going to be a middle ground from what they were from 23 and 24. seven and a half. I think they're going to go 7-5. I think they're going to go 7-5. You know, I really like, you know, they have Alabama, they have Miami. Pitt was looking really good until they just like absolutely collapsed at the end of the season. At Clemson, even at NC State, I think could give them a little bit of trouble. And then at Florida, at Ben Hill Griffin Stadium, I like the Gators so far. I like the Gators coming into 25. You know, I really like DJ Lagway. I think 7-5 is good. I don't think they're going to do any worse than that. I don't really see them going 6-6, but I think 7-5 is a good spot for them. You know, yeah, I'm rolling with that. I got to pick an under at least at some point. I can't just keep picking overs. It just can't happen. So how many teams have we done? Let me check real quick here. So we did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we got 2 more. Okay. So next up, Georgia Tech, the Yellow Jackets. You know, I really like Brent Key as a head coach. I think he's a really sneaky good coach. You know, I would not be surprised. It's hard to, you know, I believe, let me check real quick. I believe he, let me see here real quick. You know, he coached at UCF for a lot of years, was an assistant coach for them. And then, he coached for Nick Saban as their offensive line coach at Alabama, but he's an alum of Georgia Tech. I would not be shocked, although because he is an alum, I don't think. Sorry, let me be a little bit more clear. I think he's the perfect coach that would go to like a blue blood school that can totally be poached by a school that's been kind of underperforming, because he's been doing really well. In 2024, they went 7-6 and they lost the Birmingham Bowl to Vanderbilt. But there were some moments against Louisville where they looked really good and thought they could come out with the win against the Cardinals. But this season in 25, they go to Colorado, then come back home to host Gardner-Webb, Clemson, Temple, Wake Forest, Virginia Tech, at Duke, Syracuse, at NC State, at Boston College, Pittsburgh, and Georgia. I'm going to say it. I'm going to give them the over. I really like this team. I really like the Yellow Jackets. You know, how are they going to do without Haynes King? That's going to be... Oh, wait, no. Haynes King's back for another year. Okay, I needed to make sure. I was like, I'm not sure if Haynes King went into the NFL draft or not, but he's back. He's back with the team. So, yeah, so I really like Haynes King. I think he's perfect for what Georgia Tech's trying to do. You know, they're no longer the triple option team that they were under Paul Johnson, but they still have some read option elements in their offensive scheme as a whole. But you look at this, you know, at Colorado, who knows what Colorado team we're going to get. I never know if I feel like it's Deion Sanders in this Colorado team. It's all over the place. They're either going to be a really good team and kind of peak at that 9-10 win spot, or they're just going to collapse and not make a bowl game. So it's really hard to see what team that is. Then they host Clemson, so that's a good sign for them. But then they go on the road to Duke. Actually, that should be fine. At NC State is a tough spot. They host Pitt, and then of course the last game against Georgia. But I think they can get to 8 wins. I really do. And then our last team that we'll be talking about here today is the North Carolina Tar Heels at 7-5, coached by Billy Belichick. Yeah, so 7.5. It's Bill Belichick's first season. How is he going to do in the college game? That's everyone's questions. Tears out the turf, puts in the grass. He's going to get these guys ready for the pros, and he's willing to get the job done. So let's take a look at their schedule real quick. So they host TCU on September 1st. Then they go to Charlotte, at Charlotte. That's interesting. Host Richmond, at UCF, Clemson, at Cal, Virginia, at Syracuse, Stanford, at Wake Forest, Duke, and at NC State. So they're set at 7.5 wins. Ooh. No, that's a tough one. I think I'm going to go under. I think I have to do it. Just because the thing with the ACC too is just like, I just don't know if the player pool compared to the other power conferences is that high compared to the SEC, the Big Ten, and, you know, the Big 12. You know, you can argue like who's who there, but it's just tough because I feel like there's going to be chaos. There's just going to be things that you don't expect and just kind of upsets. That's what happens in college football. Look at the 2007 season where everyone was getting upset and it was the curse to be the number 2 team in the country. Not that North Carolina is going to be that team. But as I mentioned earlier, I think the Tar Heels, they're going to upset a team that's really good, but then they're going to lose to like a team like Virginia, which by the way, Virginia has like the easiest schedule in college football. We'll talk about them later in the next episode actually. But just a super easy schedule. But I that's what I think of this North Carolina team. I think they're going to be so much exposure, kind of similar to what Colorado was in their first season under Deion Sanders. I think that's kind of what that team is going to be looking like. And, and then the development of the players into the future seasons, I could see them doing a lot better where they're developing, and then they have this really nice year. Basically, I just think they're Colorado what they were the past 2 seasons. I think they have the potential to be something like that, but only time will tell. But that's what I got for the first half of the ACC predictions. If you have any other, let me know what your thoughts are on that. If you disagree with me, that's totally fine. That's just my opinion. But yeah, that's basically what I think of the first half of the ACC. And then in the next episode, we'll dig into the second half of that conference and what their win totals are set as well. Getting out of the world of college football, saw the Belmont Stakes. Wasn't quite right. Journalism finished in second place, a very respectable spot, but lost to Sovereignty. Sovereignty, who won the Kentucky Derby. It was the winner of the Kentucky Derby versus the winner of the Preakness. And Sovereignty came out with the win. And, with all the criticism that I gave Sovereignty for not running in the Preakness, it sucks because he could have had the potential to win the Triple Crown. You got to respect the move because it worked out for them. They saved his energy, conserved his energy, and he was perfectly fit to run in the Belmont Stakes and really just pushed his way to the victory for the Belmont Stakes. But even for journalism, very respectable, finishing 2-1-2. Great sight to see. And overall, a respectable horse racing Triple Crown for all 3 of these races. I enjoyed all of them. But also, give some love to some other horse racing. If you're not very familiarized or very, if you're just a casual and you're trying to get more into horse racing, watch the other horse racing events that go on, whether you see them usually on NBC Sports or read some articles on Blood Horse. There's a lot of great stuff in horse racing. It's a great sport. I'm definitely trying to get more into it this year. I even took a class of it in college calling Producing Kentucky Derby Stories, which was one of my favorite classes that I ever took. But, so even though the three main stakes are out of the way, there's still a lot of great horse racing coming up. So, but yeah, that's what I got on horse racing. Of course, the NBA Finals. As of right now, as the time of this recording, the Pacers are up 2-1. That could easily change because they play here tonight, I believe, against the Thunder, and just a great series. I think it's a perfect matchup. A lot of people saying, "Oh, it's not enjoyable because it doesn't have the big markets." Well, that's baloney, first of all, because if you were doing this in the NFL and you had the Green Bay Packers and the Kansas City Chiefs, they would be all over it. And those are 2 pretty small markets. Kansas City is actually a pretty big city, but Green Bay is a super small market, but they have a huge fan base. So that's the same case for Indiana and Oklahoma City. They have huge fan bases. Indiana is the Hoosier State. They're all about basketball. They're crazy about basketball. So it's just kind of bogus. I think it's kind of to be honest, a dumb narrative to even say that. And I think if you're saying that, you're delusional. But, nonetheless, people say what they want to say, and I'm going to enjoy the series either way. The NBA Finals, Game 4 tonight. I'm picking the Thunder tonight. I wanted to go 7 games just as a fan, just to enjoy it, but it's hard to bet against this Indiana team. And just because I said that, I think Indiana's going to win tonight, even though I just picked the Thunder. That's kind of what my odds are here today. But yeah, it should be. That's all that I got here today. But before I go into that, I got a question for y'all. Just basically, I just want to hear. So, college football has a lot of traditions going on throughout its history of the sport. Let me know in the comments, what is the best tradition in college football? And I'll talk about it on the next episode of the podcast. I got some that come to mind, but I want to know what your guys' thoughts are. Maybe some under the radar rivalries and traditions that I may not even know about, but because you go to this really small school or this tradition that doesn't really get talked about much, I would love to talk about it in the next episode. But for now, that's going to do it here today. Make sure to follow us on all of our social media platforms. We're on TikTok, Facebook, not sure about Facebook, but Facebook maybe. Twitter, we're definitely on that. TikTok, Instagram, and then as well as keep tuning in, listening on Spotify, or watching on YouTube. But that's going to do it here today for the Tyler Bright and Early podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Bright, PBJ Productions' official flagship podcast for all things college football center.